Hey guys, it's Will from Tested.
And it's Norm from Tested.
Joining us today from, well, it seems like the Bonsai Institute, is Lloyd Case.
Here.
It's been, what, about 6 months since the last time we built a PC?
Right.
And last time we built something kind of crazy high-end.
Right.
It was a Titan-equipped mega gaming slash
but
compute
small,
machine, but
yeah.
in a small box.
Right.
This time,
We're going to build a pure gaming rig, so
Okay.
I make no compromises for general purpose use, right? And then it's also going to be slightly larger, but not that much larger. It's going to be in a micro ATX case instead of a mini ITX case.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it. Oh, and it's going to adhere to. I wrote an article for my blog a while back. Said it's basically if you're upgrading your system, what you want to upgrade to is a graphics card and your hard drive to an SSD, and you can kind of forget about the CPU, even if it's way back to Core 2 Quad.
this is the place that I'm in now with my machine at home.
Right.
You know, I have an old fast CPU,
Right.
but I have a 2-3-year-old video card, and I just put a new SSD in. The SSD made a huge performance improvement.
Right. And then some caveats to that. But most of the time, most modern games are GPU intensive and CPU bound. And they don't use the entire CPU a lot of the time. I don't say CPU, I mean GPU bound. And so what they're doing is you don't need a high-end CPU for most games. Now the exception are some RTS games, if you're really into that kind of stuff.
Just because they have lots of AI routines, right?
Right. Or things like Civilization, where you might be waiting a long time between turns.
Okay.
But even then, I mean, if you go from a Core i7 high-end 4770 to a Core i5, you're not going to see that much difference.
I haven't played a game of Civ that I had to wait an interminable amount of time for turns in ages.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go
yeah.
through all the components that you've picked out.
Right.
Like you said, you've based this build on a GPU
Right.
and a storage
Right.
SSD. We're going to call it its components. There's an
Right.
article on Tested that you've written right now detailing all the parts if you want all the specific
I'm
details.
going to click a thing right here.
Yeah, it's in the description below, and also the benchmarks,
Right.
which you'll be running on this system, which you're building actually for yourself.
Right.
So this is something that you totally are behind.
Right.
But wait, there's more.
But there's more. We're also going to be giving away
Yeah.
a few of these components. So watch the entire video. At the end of the video, we'll tell you how you could win some very, very nice components donated from the manufacturers.
It's what? We should tell them what the components
Well,
are.
we'll get to the very first component, which is the very most important one,
Right.
Yeah.
which is the graphics card.
Right.
And for the graphics card, you've chosen right here an EVGA GTX 780.
Right.
That's an NVIDIA 780 GeForce graphics card.
Right.
Pretty much the best, second best Exynos Titan
Right.
high-end single
It's
GPU.
built around the same GPU as Titan, but more tuned for pure gaming. It's
Okay.
not really a compute engine. It does some compute, of course, like all the GTX GPUs do. But
Can we lay out the landscape for what GPUs are available? So you have
So-
NVIDIA and AMD.
AMD. NVIDIA currently has two main GPU lines. The Titans, which are basically built around their compute engine that they use for little supercomputers.
Supercomputer
boxes.
stuff.
Yeah.
But do you need? If you're, why would you need $1,000? They're $1,000 video cards. They're
The
very
Titans
expensive.
are, yes.
Yeah. What do you need that for?
You would really want that for if you were doing GPU compute.
Okay.
Pure GPU. If you were like the Bitcoin miner kind of guy, then
Yeah.
maybe you would be interested in that.
But if you're just playing games on like a 1080p monitor, that is massive overkill for
Right.
everything coming out now. And it seems like in the foreseeable future, given that next gen consoles are like year-old PCs.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So step down from the Titan is the 700 series.
Right. And
And-
the 780, like I said, is the high end of that. Uses the same GPU as Titan. The slightly overclocked one we have here is about $660.
Okay.
Okay.
So pretty significant
Yeah,
jump down
that's a
from
big part of your
$1,000.
budget you're going to put onto the GPU.
Right, but also way down from
780
$1,000, right?
Right,
So.
definitely. And then below that, if they want an alternate,
Right.
would you recommend something like a 770 or
Yes,
something over
the
on
770 is actually almost a steal in some respects. It's the same as last generation 680. The GPU is the same, but they've beefed up the clock rates a little bit, and they use really fast memory. And so it's actually faster than the old 680, but it's priced like the old 670. It's about $350 to $400.
Wow, $400 as opposed to 660 for a
Right.
70. That's really different for
Right.
NVIDIA this time because the 780 and the 770, they're not just different clock versions of each other.
Right. But when I looked at game benchmarks, not all the general purpose stuff, but actual game benchmarks, the 780 came out significantly ahead of the 770.
Okay.
So
But bear in mind that I game on a 2560 by 1600
so
monitor.
2K monitor basically.
Right. So that makes sense.
there's so many different variants of these video cards available. Like when you look at a GeForce 770 or GeForce 780,
Right.
there's different RAM configurations. There's all sorts of different
Right.
clocks. There's crazy huge coolers. There's things with 2 fans and
Right.
water coolers and all this stuff. Like what do you go for stock designs?
I first look at noise first of all.
Okay.
That's sort of really important in my builds. It's just kind of, even though this is going to get a little noisy when you load it up, I wanted the dual fan rather than the default configuration because it's going to be a little quieter. They spin the fans a little slower. On the other hand, some of them you can buy now from certain vendors have 3 fans. And I'm thinking 3 fans, point of failure. Let's not,
It's like a razor with 5 blades.
Right.
Okay.
Let's not increase the chance that it might fail, right? And then, and they're not the default coolers, which is great. I mean, NVIDIA did a great job with those coolers, but they're still single fan coolers.
And they're old now. I mean,
Right.
there have been advancements beyond that.
Right.
So the next component is the SSD.
Right.
If you've put an SSD in your machine at home, you know, like this is a
right.
major lifestyle improvement.
Yep.
Your computer boots faster, your apps launch faster,
Right.
browser opens faster. It makes everything seem just a little bit faster, except for maybe Photoshop and
So in the past, when
Acrobat.
we've built systems with SSDs, we've chosen to have maybe, because SSDs were expensive for
Right.
a long time, an SSD paired with a large capacity
Right.
standard
and
spinning.
yeah,
RAM
what you
drive.
do is you put like your normal apps and Windows on your SSD, and then you put all your games in your hard drive. Well, the problem with that, of course, you're still running your games off your hard drive, and you have the same issues with takes a while to load. Level loads, particularly, can take a while. For example, a good example is the next version of X, the X Space Series game. It's going to be 64-bit only, and so it's going to obviously have a lot of data, right? That's
Yeah.
going to want to load. So the faster, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
now, you've gone with a big SSD.
Right.
The bigger SSDs are, the more expensive they get, obviously. Right now, if you're in a more budget-focused mind, you can get the same SSD,
Right.
the same Samsung Evo 840 Evo rather, but you can get it like for $250 for the 250 gig version.
Right, and the increment doesn't increase that much for 500. 500 is actually
Right.
kind of the price per gigabyte sweet spot.
Okay.
If you're looking at it that way, so you can you can get them for like well under $400.
And the 500 gigabyte main drive is enough that you're using this. Well, you're using the 750 gig drive
Right.
is the only drive in this machine.
Right.
You can add a hard drive for $80 or $100
Right.
at this point if you need more space.
Right.
And actually, I found that using the new feature of Steam where you can have multiple games installed in multiple locations
Right.
lets you put the stuff that you care about in the SSD
Right.
and then dump all the other stuff that you play once and then never touch again on the hard drive.
I figured with a 750 gig SSD, I wouldn't ever have to worry about putting another hard drive. If it's only for gaming, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not storing my photos on this or any kind of stuff like that.
No media, no
But I can
Dropbox.
put my entire Steam collection and my Origin collection. Yes, I said the word Origin. on one drive. Not
I
worried
have
about.
Dead Space 3.
In Battlefield.
And
So
Battlefield.
if you choose, for example, if you want to spend just like $100 and get a 120 gig SSD,
Right.
and you can get one, the Evo, the 840 series,
Right.
is there going to be a performance difference between that and something like the 500 gig?
Yeah,
and the 700
that's
gig?
where you have to start putting all your applications on the hard drive. And what you get is something that boots fast and swaps fast, but that's about it.
But the actual SSD, it's the same performance,
Right.
regardless of capacity.
Right.
There's small differences, as I understand, between the different capacities,
Yeah.
but nothing major.
The key thing about the Evo series people should be aware of is that it uses TLC. So that most SSDs that you buy will put 2 bits per cell. The Evos put 3 bits per cell. Now, there's some question as to the lifetime of those drives. When I looked into that, it's like the lifetime is going to be years and years. I'm not kind of too worried about it for normal use, right? I'm not running a server. I'm not doing database searches. So I'm pretty comfortable with the lifetime.
By
of
the
this
time this wears out,
I will-
a 750 gig SSD is going to seem small.
drive. Right.
Okay.
All right.
So CPU's next.
Yes, and while the CPU isn't at the crux of this build, we still want to talk about it because
Right.
it's still an important part of
Right.
building a PC.
And sort of adhering to this idea that the graphics card and the storage is probably the key pieces here, I still went with a reasonably good CPU. This is still quad-core CPU. The 4570, Intel 4570, I think it's 3.2 gigahertz, if I recall correctly. At any rate, it's not their high end. It's several steps down from their high end. In fact, it's one step above the low end quad core.
Okay.
And it's about a sub $200 CPU. Should get the job done just fine.
And this is a Haswell.
Yep, it is Haswell.
So can you talk about the decision of choosing Haswell as opposed to a last generation CPU that might cost different?
No real difference in cost, as it turns out. I mean, the way Intel prices things is that you're not getting any, unless somebody has a fire sale individual store, you're probably not going to get Ivy Bridges that much cheaper. And you do get better performance. And with Windows 8.1, you get better, more efficient power usage,
Even on the desktop.
even on desktop.
So this is not the Haswell with any integrated graphics, although you've done
No,
testing
this
for
has
that.
integrated
Oh,
graphics,
this-
but we're not going to use it.
We're not going to use it.
Right.
Okay. Is there a difference between buying one without the integrated graphics? And
You
would
can't.
recommend that?
I'm not aware of any Haswells that are shipping
So
without.
they
integrated
all have the
graphics.
Intel
Yep.
HD 500,
Right.
5000 all the way up to.
Right. I think this is a 4600 in actually.
All right.
Now, one thing that came out recently was Intel's Ivy Bridge Extreme, which is their 6-core monster
Right.
CPU for people that need tons of threads.
If you're
lots of memory.
transcoding video.
Right.
Right.
Actually, and in some cases, it's actually slower than Haswell quad core. There's a great article on Non-Tech saying, the other thing, unless you really need a ton of memory bandwidth or 6 cores, just get a Haswell. And then the other thing about the Ivy Bridge Extreme is it's still using the old X79 chipsets. You don't get all the modern benefits. You won't ever find Thunderbolt on an X79 board, for example. So, based on that kind of thing, I decided I didn't want to mess around with Ivy Bridge Extreme.
All right.
Okay. So in the old days when we were at Maximum PC, we always used to put on the cover when we do a build issue, all you need is a screwdriver
Right.
to build a PC. Is that true still?
That's still true for the most part. I think we're going to find, in fact, we don't even need the screwdriver for very much. This is my screwdriver. It's got a clutch, so you can turn the clutch.
All you need is a
way
screwdriver.
down.
That's a pretty impressive screwdriver.
hell
So you can never,
screwdriver,
you don't strip your screw.
Yeah. So why do you like this one?
I like this one because it has a lot of torque when you need it. So I actually use it for things other than building PCs when I want more torque. But it also has a clutch, so I don't overdrive things.
Right.
It has 2 speeds, if you ever care about that, and forward and reverse. And it kind of folds up, which is kind of nice to get into some tight spots.
I just like your long driver. I find
Yep.
that's the useful.
Yep,
the most
and it's still
like-
magnetic too, so
Oh, that's good.
kind of hold it.
So no worries about there's no magnetic storage in this machine.
Right.
But even if there is,
There is, I mean,
there's no reason to worry about magnetic tips.
that's right. I mean, have you noticed that some PCs actually have magnets in them now for things like case closing and stuff like
Yeah.
that? So it doesn't matter.
Who knows? Who knew? Okay.
So let's get to building.
Okay.
So the first thing we're going to do is grab the case.
Right.
The case. This is a Corsair case.
Corsair Obsidian 350D.
Okay.
It's got a window in it. You'll see why in a little while. It comes in a non-windowed version for like $10 less.
Okay.
But
Now,
it's
I like no windows.
right.
Because that means I don't have to worry about cable management, any of that kind of business.
Well,
I just do enough to get the airflow good,
Right.
and then slam the door on and never look at it again.
Right. Well, as you're going to see shortly, we're going to run most of our cables behind the motherboard tray.
Okay.
So there won't be too much of that. The power supply cables we will dress a little bit in the sense that we'll fold up and tie off the ones we don't use, but the rest of them I'm not going to care much about.
So last time you built a PC using a Prodigy case, it was very
Right.
small, compact, could fit in the living room. This is not a big full tower case.
No, but it's a little bigger.
A little bigger, but this is something you'd want to put on top of your desk, below your desk,
Below your desk.
below your desk still. And what are some features of this case?
Now, one of the nice things Will and I were noticing about this, let's take off the both sides.
I'll grab the other side here.
Thumb screws.
Thumb screws are great. So I just rebuilt my PC in a new case the other day.
This actually has dedicated, can we see this?
Yeah, we can actually flip around to.
Yeah, we can.
See where my finger is? These are dedicated SSD trays.
Oh wow,
Which is great.
okay.
And you just slide the SSD in from the back, from the back side of the case, and it just snaps into place. No tools needed. Wonderful.
That's
I love this
fantastic.
feature. And then even when we put the optical drive in, and yes, we're going to use an optical drive just because I'm old school.
Where does your floppy go, Lloyd?
Thanks, Will.
You're welcome.
What's a floppy?
Yeah, it's the thing. Yeah, it's like the USB thumb drive.
Goes in your pants.
Yeah.
Anyway, when we put the optical drive in, it just also snaps in, no tools needed. In fact, the only time we'll need our screwdriver probably is screwing in the motherboard, which goes down.
And there's USB 3 ports on the front of this, which use a
Correct.
new header. We'll talk about that when we get further.
The one that I really loathe, actually.
Yeah, it's you can't, not very easy to bend.
So my motherboard doesn't have the USB 3 header ports, even though it has USB 3 ports on the.
You have the
motherboard. So I
one
had
that
to get
runs
the
out the
adapter.
back, and okay.
No, I had to get an adapter.
Oh, you're okay.
Yeah, it was a bit of a hassle.
Right.
Okay, so this is a steel case, right?
Yes, but it's very light for a steel case because a lot of the internal parts are plastic.
It looks like they did, and it looks like they did a good job of cutting stuff out. I love this big. I don't know if you guys can see
Yes.
it, but this big cutout so that you can change coolers without having to take the motherboard
Right.
out.
If you like those high-end
great.
coolers and some new sexy high-end cooler comes out that you're really thrilled about, you don't have to remove your motherboard anymore to install.
Or water cooling or whatever you want to do.
Right.
So can we talk about the next piece, which is the power supply?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we're going to install the power supply now.
I have one of your screws over here. I don't know what you've done. We foolishly didn't get our screw cup.
This is also made by Corsair, GS700.
We should rotate this around so that the side camera can see well. This is not a modular power supply, Lloyd.
No, it's not. But it's relatively low cost for what it is. It's a power efficient, I think, 80 plus gold. No, 80 plus bronze. I can't remember.
Okay.
It's 80 plus bronze at least, so it's fairly power efficient. It is not a modular power supply, so we're going to kind of fold up some cables and tighten and use it.
But that's fine. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
So when searching for a power supply and when shopping for one,
Right.
like there's wattage that you want to consider, and then there's also the reliability.
Right.
So how do you evaluate those?
Well, first I go to brand names I trust, and those brand names are, Corsair's one of them. Seasonic is another.
Okay.
Cooler Master I've had good luck with. I can't think of others that I would. I'm not certainly not negative it down on other power supplies, but those are the ones I've tended to use.
I'm always interested in quiet power supplies. Like that's one of the things I want to see.
In my production system, I've got a Seasonic 660 watt power supply. It's got a little hybrid switch where the fan actually doesn't turn on unless it needs it. This one actually is automatically that way. The GS700, the fan doesn't. It came with a little sticker that I took off. I should have kept it on there. It says, if you don't hear the fan running, don't worry. It'll turn on when it's needed.
That's great. That's fantastic.
So.
And then if you go to like somewhere, like Corsair's website, or when you're
Right.
shopping, and you find that one manufacturer will have many power supplies, the same wattage rating.
Right.
So what are the differences there?
Well, the differences are, it may be listed as the same wattage rating, but you'll find that the current load may be actually different. You'll find other things like the kind of capacitors used internally may be a little different. Some people, I've heard complaints about this particular power supply, although it's not universal, that, for example, some of the capacitors make a high-pitched whining noise. Now,
Some people are more sensitive to that. Than
yeah,
others, I think.
I'm not, and another system I got with a similar power supply doesn't have that problem, so but just something to be warned about. To have to be perfectly honest, to disclose this power supply I'm including in this case with the glass side because it lights up.
Oh, okay.
3 different colors. So
Ooh, 3 colors.
right.
Let's go ahead and start putting the power supply in. While we're doing that, this isn't an SLI capable power supply, I assume.
it is actually.
It is.
Yes, but we're not going to be doing SLI.
But do you? I mean, a lot of people. One of the questions we always get is, should I get 2 cheap video cards or 1 expensive video card? And we usually push people toward 1 expensive video
Right,
card.
right.
Just because the problems with SLI, sometimes it requires a couple of days or even weeks for new games to support SLI properly, and it's just better to have 1 good GPU than 2 kind of crappy GPUs.
Well, and if you really, I mean, if you're playing on a 1080p display, I would say that a 780 or even a 770 is going to drive that 1080p display on most games at just fine frame rates.
Yeah, we don't live in a world where we need.
Right, we're not doing stereoscopic, we're not doing 3-screen gaming, or at least I don't. I tend to just use 1 monitor. If you only have 1 monitor, you don't need 2 or 3 cards.
Okay, so next question, Lloyd. There's a fan on the bottom of the power supply.
Right.
Do you put the fan down
facing
or
down.
up?
Facing
You
down.
put it facing, so it pulls in air from the bottom.
Right.
This case has a filter on the bottom.
Right, and you'll notice this case has feet
So
built
it's
in.
elevated, yeah.
So on a carpeted floor, it'll still suck air in from the bottom.
Okay. So you want your power supply to suck.
Right,
Okay. Very good.
in a good way.
Yeah, of course.
Here you go.
Do you do any cable management stuff before you?
Yeah, I'm going to figure out what we're going to need for cables and then tie off the rest right away.
Okay.
So then I have to worry about it later.
I always encourage people to be careful when they're when they're scooching the case around, especially with steel cases, because you'll scratch up your table, floor, or the case.
Right.
I don't know which is worse. Probably the table.
Particularly those cases that have glossy sides.
And these screws just came with the power supply,
Right.
Because they'll fit, and you just need the 4 screws.
Right.
Yeah, they line up. They line up in one of 2 ways. Typically, you can put power supplies in either way, up and down. So you kind of want to look and think about how you want the air to work.
Right.
Is my advice usually on that.
Most cases where the power supply is installed on the bottom, which is the majority of gaming cases these days, seem to want to prefer. They tell you to install the power supply so it's facing down.
With the fan facing down.
Facing down.
Yeah.
Now the SSDs are not going to draw a lot of power. The things that draw the most power is going to be the graphics card.
The graphics card and the CPU to some extent.
If someone chose to use a 770 or even a 600 series or something lower power, what wattage power supply?
In all
would they want?
honesty, even with the 780, I probably could have gone with like the 600 watt version of this.
So 600 watt is a good floor.
Right. Right, for a gaming rig, particularly now, if you're going to do any overclocking at all, or if you're going to overclock your GPU, because EVGA, for example, and the other manufacturers, ASUS, supply utilities that allow you to overclock relatively safely. But it's still, anytime you start doing that, the voltage goes up and you start sucking more power.
But I mean, why bother? If your video card is good enough to run whatever monitor you have at a playable frame rate, then just
Right, that's my take.
be happy with what you have is the way I work. So you're going to tie these off. I think then we should drop the motherboard, the case down on the floor for a minute, and do CPU and memory and stuff like that outside of the case, just so people can see it better.
Okay, so we talk about it first.
Yes.
Before we
Yeah,
tie
talk
this
about
up
it first.
Okay.
So let's talk about the motherboard. I'll put this right here so people can see.
Now, I had a couple of thoughts while I was choosing the motherboard. First, my initial thought was, based on the idea that I'm going with a relatively low-cost CPU, relatively, that I would get a really cheap motherboard, H87 chipset, stuff that would go in a very mainstream kind of system would cost maybe $75.
That sounds like a reasonable price for a motherboard.
I decided to go a little higher end. This is the Z87 Plus from ASUS. It actually uses the higher end Z87 chipset.
Okay.
Has some additional features, better voltage regulators, plus some additional things inside the chipset itself for better USB support.
So what are it looks like you have at least 6 SATA ports.
Right.
Are they all SATA 6G?
I believe most of them are.
Okay.
If I recall correctly.
And then on the back panel we have, it looks like audio, a whole mess of USB,
Right.
and then video ports as well.
Right, yeah. You can. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can just ignore them, which we're going to do.
Okay.
Or you can get software that will allow you to use the system in sort of when you're running your desktop stuff, it'll use the integrated graphics, and when you're running your games, it'll use the dedicated GPU.
But you only plug into the motherboard for
right,
that? Okay.
that's correct. And but we're just going to ignore that and just use the GPU.
I mean, the GeForce 7 series is idle low
Very
enough
low,
that it kind of doesn't matter on it.
Doesn't matter that much.
This is a mini ITX?
No, this is micro ATX.
Micro ATX.
No, you can tell by the fact that it's got 4 slots.
That's right.
Yeah.
4 slots.
So you have 2 PCI Express 16s,
Right.
and then two small ones.
yeah.
Okay. So
sound cards.
let's why don't you pass the bag up here and we'll put it on the bag. Just so
One
it
thing to
doesn't
note,
shock anything.
the other thing to note about this motherboard, real quick, and then we'll leave it alone, is that it has an 8-pin
power header.
ATX 12V header instead of a lot of micro ATX boards only have a 4-pin. Right?
Okay.
So you can use this for overclocking and stuff like that if you care
Okay.
to.
Great.
So let's talk about procedure when you're laying out your
Yeah,
motherboard.
shock. Right.
You want to put it on top of the static bag?
Right. Yes. And if we were doing this in an officially, if we're building this for profit, we would have this on a complete anti-static surface. I found that a lot of modern electronic components are built more rugged when it comes to anti-static or electrostatic discharge. Still, it can be a problem, particularly if we're in a very dry climate, whether
if
it's
you're
very
in
dry and
Phoenix.
hot, or if it's Wisconsin in the wintertime.
Okay.
So you should take extra precautions in those very dry.
Don't do this on your wool rug in the wintertime in Minnesota.
Right.
This
Good
is
advice.
a $140 motherboard. If you
Right.
wanted to cut some corners and maybe
You get an H87, for $100 or $90. Yeah.
And what do you lose there?
I think you lose some USB ports. You might lose some SATA 6 support. I'm not sure. The chipset's kind of blur in my mind right now. But I was looking at the matrix, and there's just a few. Most people won't notice what they lose. You'll probably get a 4-pin ATX 12V, but if you're not overclocking, it doesn't matter.
You have 6 SATA ports here. You're only going to be using 2 at most for an optical storage.
Right.
But if you're considering upgrading
Correct.
hard drives later, putting terabyte hard drives in here,
That's
you'll
right.
need those later.
Maybe adding a third. Okay, so next up is CPU.
Right.
So let me give that to you.
This is an Intel Core i5-4570.
And when you buy a CPU, you typically get, if you buy a retail CPU, you get the cooler. You get an air cooler
Right.
that comes along with it.
Right.
We're not going to be using that.
No, we're going to use a sealed liquid cooler.
Liquid cooler. Okay, so you said sealed liquid cooler, which
Right.
means it's a self-contained unit.
Right. You don't have to get a funnel out and fill it up with liquid periodically or any of that stuff. It's all sealed.
And do those
Guaranteed
last
for-
forever?
They're guaranteed for, if I recall correctly, between 5 and 7 years, depending on the model.
Which is again, like the lifetime, probably the maximum lifetime of a machine
Right.
you're building these days is going to be what, 5-6 years?
Right. I like them for a couple of reasons. If you run them, if you're not overclocking, they're
Mm-hmm.
generally a little bit quieter particularly than stock air coolers.
Yeah.
There are air coolers that are theoretically quieter than this, but they're these big honking things that don't like taking up the space inside.
I have
the
one
case.
of those, and it is enormous, and I
Right.
feel like it bends the whole motherboard.
Right. This
every
takes
time
up
you
less
take it
room
out.
inside the case.
So this is Corsair's H60. Does Corsair make this themselves, or do they
I
contract
believe
this
it's
out
made by
to-
Coolit. This particular one's made by Coolit.
And there are only a handful of companies that actually do the.
Two of them I know, Coolit and Ace Tech.
Ace Tech,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And you can tell the difference, actually, if it has a square pump and heat sink at the end, it's probably made by Coolit, and if it has a round one, it's probably made by Ace Tech.
So the components for this are really straightforward. It's a cooling block on this end, a
Got a little
pump,
pump inside of it.
a sealed loop, and then there's no reservoir even really.
Right.
It's just a radiator, and then you hook the fans on the radiator.
Right.
as
Yeah,
well.
we're
The
gonna
fan
show
came with
people.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Get our beauty shot over here.
yeah. So right now you have the block here.
Does it come with the thermal paste already on
Yep.
it? Oh, that's nice.
We're not gonna
Paste
worry
is
about
already on
attaching
there.
thermal
Don't
paste.
need to squeeze anything on there, and then you just have 2 tubes, and it goes up to the radiator.
Right.
And are these compatible with all the recent sockets? Like,
Yes.
could you go all the way back to like 1156, 1136, and stuff like that?
Yes, and even 1366 and
Okay.
socket 2011 and even AMD sockets.
Oh, that's great.
So, unless you buy an Intel branded one, which of course won't work. with
Right,
AMD.
right. So then when you hook this on, are we just going to put the radiator on the 120 centimeter fan on the
Yeah,
back?
no,
Is
what we're
that
going to
the
do is we're
plan?
going to pull off that fan and use the fan
Okay.
that came with the cooler.
Okay, great. Well, we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yep.
Before we put the CPU in, which is the next step, we should talk about the contest again.
Yes.
Because we do have a good giveaway. Norm, are you prepared to share the items we are going to give
Absolutely.
away?
We talked about them earlier. So the video card, that $650 video card from
GeForce
EVGA,
GTX 780,
780 overclocked.
Yeah.
We're giving one of those away.
the dope 2-fan model.
2-fan model from EVGA,
Okay.
and also the really nice case,
Yeah.
and also a power supply.
I just built my PC in the slightly older version of this case. Lloyd built his PC and is building his PC right now
Right.
in this case.
Right.
It's a good case. We
Continue
like
watching. We'll give out details on how to win those at the end of the video.
it. Okay. So CPU, let's put the CPU in.
Right.
This is one of the things we always say when we're building PCs is that there's very few places you can screw up to the point that there's permanent damage.
Right.
This is one of them. Yeah.
Because modern sockets have pins in them now, you can easily bend a pin by accident.
So
This is the moment where we become a instruction. We're at a crossroads. We're
Right.
either an instructional video or a viral oh fuck
is this
video.
a disaster?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If smoke starts coming out when we turn this thing on, we'll know we did it wrong.
So let's get this guy lined up here so people can see. This is the CPU socket right here. These are thousands and thousands of tiny pins. I don't even know how many pins it is on a modern CPU.
Now, if you'll notice on the back of the CPU, I don't know if you can get close
show.
enough,
Yep, I can
there's a
show
little
here.
tiny triangle in one corner.
It's going to be way too shiny to see.
Actually,
But it's a cutout, right?
Right.
On
Well,
this
there's a triangle
there's
also.
a gold triangle in the bottom corner.
Usually, although they didn't. Yeah, here it is, right there. See that?
Okay, so you line up the triangle on the CPU with the triangle on the socket. When you do this, there's usually gaps cut in the side of the socket. So you can see it right here. They're right here, and that's the way you want to hold the CPU.
Right. And you don't have to trust you don't have to trust the triangle. You can say, do my little cutouts line up? And you say yes.
Okay.
they do.
Oh, so there's notches and grooves on the
Right,
side.
right.
And
But-
then you just want to drop it right in, right?
Drop it straight in.
Don't wiggle.
Actually, don't drop. Just sort of nestle it in gently. Don't push it down.
Okay.
And don't wiggle it sideways. That's right.
So if you
Don't
if
come in
you-
at an angle and do this. Just
yeah,
straight down.
if you mess up, just lift it off and try it again.
Right.
Don't try to jam it into place by using your hands. And then the latch just folds down,
Right.
hooks under the screw on the south
Correct.
end of the socket,
Yep.
and then you push
Single
the lever
socket.
down until it clicks into place.
Now, all motherboards also come with a little shield.
Right.
I'll just display right here that protects that the CPU socket.
Right.
Keep that.
Yes. If you ever sell the motherboard
Or have
Or
to
warranty.
RMA it.
Yeah.
You need this little piece.
The other thing, but however, I should warn people that the only time I've ever bent pins in a socket was taking one of these off. Not ever putting a CPU in, it was taking one of these things off.
And if you bend the pins on these sockets at this point, that's just a do-over, right?
Right.
You're not gonna. You used to be able to use like mechanical pencils to straighten them out, but they're so small,
They're so
and
small.
fine, they're just going to break off.
Get a new
probably.
motherboard. Yeah.
So let's do RAM while we have the motherboard out, because that's easy to do.
No, actually, let's do it. when
Oh,
we
you
get
want to do it in?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then I guess the next thing to do is to get this back up, get the case back up. I'll grab that.
Let's install the power supply.
And yeah. And
Oh, the power supply is installed.
Power
Let's
supply
press
is
the cables
installed.
to get the ones we don't need out of the way.
Let's
Now
get it so
remember,
people
we've
can
got.
see.
We're going to need
Okay.
main power, right?
That's
So
that,
set that
that one
aside.
we need. I'll hold the cables we need.
We'll need two PCI Express by 6 power.
Six
right.
six prong PCI
You notice
Express
that
cables.
they can be either 8-prong or 6-prong, right?
Yep.
So
And they're typically labeled PCIe.
Right.
Yeah, so instead of, there's another 8-pin in here that you're not going
And
to want
then
to use.
the 8-pin ATX12V that goes on the motherboard.
So
also.
when you're making one of these 6 pins, an 8-pin,
Mm-hmm.
you always put the wire, you always put the thing on the side that it comes
Right,
out of.
that's right.
That's the only way you can screw that
Right.
up. I don't think you'd have a hard time doing it the wrong way, but
Right.
just to be
And I'm going to do
safe.
something radical here that I don't usually do if I do a multi-drive build.
Okay.
Is that I'm going to attach the SSD and the optical drive to the same power connector. That way I can just.
Will
Why
they
do you not
reach?
normally
That's
do that?
crazy.
Because I usually have multiple hard drives, so I just dedicate one power
Right.
to
Okay.
those. But since we only have one.
And then that's it, right?
Yep, that's it.
The
We're gonna-
fans will all plug into the motherboard.
Right.
I think there's some zip ties in that power supply box.
We're just going to use a.
Oh, you're going to use a twist tie.
I loathe zip ties.
Why do you love zip ties? Zip ties are great.
Because I'm always messing around with stuff, so
Uh-huh.
having to cut off a zip tie is like nerve-wracking. And
You know the right way to cut off a zip tie, right?
no, tell me, Warren. I don't know the right way.
So you cut off the end of the snip away from the cords. You never get between the cord and the tie.
Okay.
Never cut the tie part. Cut the end of the. Hand me a zip tie, Norm. I'll show you. Just rather than use words, let's just use language.
Okay, we're going to leave that nestled right there for now.
So I'm going to burn one of your zip ties.
That's all right.
But if you're cutting the zip tie, it's on your finger. You never want to go here
Okay.
between this part.
Right.
You always just cut this tip off of the nub because then it just falls apart, and you don't risk jacking up your cable.
Good to know. Okay, so that's all the power connectors we should need.
This seems really straightforward.
Okay, next comes the motherboard. Oh, no, next comes the I/O shield, which is inside the motherboard box.
This is the mistake. This is the one you always forget. It's not even on the list.
Because it's in the motherboard box. It
It's
comes
in
with
the motherboard box. It's far, far away. This is the thing that covers the gaps between the motherboard and the case for all the ports.
Right, right.
Technically,
ATX connector.
what happens if you don't use the shield?
You get a little extra dust in your system.
Bad airflow.
Bad airflow, yeah. There we go. This guy.
And it looks like your machine was built by rank amateurs instead of
That's right.
void case.
It's embarrassing.
Some cases will come with their own shield.
They're
and
useless.
just throw them away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in the old days, there used to be a relatively small set of I/O configurations in the back, so you could actually use those sometimes, but not anymore.
Now it's basically infinite.
All
let's
motherboard
double
specific.
check here.
Let's
So motherboard's going to go in that way.
do that
This
on
is
the.
gonna go that way?
Oh well, you always-
See? Can we see that?
it's this one right here. Boy, tilted up this way.
Backwards. There we go.
Yeah.
So
That's-
I'm just double checking to make sure that the orientation's correct. Yes,
Yep.
this is the way it's going to go in the case.
Do you worry about all the little the little metal nubbins hanging out of the back? or do
Yes, I do. I don't peel them off. I just make
Okay.
sure they're bent back. Like
fold them up a little bit so
The
they're
one
out
that
of the
always
way?
gets me is the net where I've installed this with a
Yeah.
networking connection.
Show
Oh,
people what
hold
we
on.
mean. It's kind of a pain.
Yeah.
So the I/O, we match that up, so we know it's going to orient this way. And what you were talking about is in the back here.
Right.
These little metal.
Flashing, it's called.
Yeah. The Ethernet one I've jammed into the Ethernet port before,
Right.
and that's basically a complete do-over because you got to disassemble the whole machine, take the motherboard out,
Right.
to fix it.
So how do you fold it?
I just fold it up.
Fold
with
it
your
up, bend
finger.
it in.
Bend it back. Yeah, I don't snip it off or anything. There's no need to do that. I just fold it up. Make sure the others are also out of the way.
Usually they're pretty good, but
Yep.
you just want to be just in case.
Yeah. And we're gonna, actually, before we even do that, we're going to take this fan off because we're going to replace it.
No, we're not going to use it. You want me to? Oh, you got it.
You want to drive the screwdriver, Will?
Yeah, I can drive. I'm in the position to see this. I'm a big boy now.
Something fell down.
I think that was our sign. The magnet on the steel case isn't the most convenient. I feel like a NASCAR guy with this screwdriver. This is awesome. I just use an old-fashioned manual twisty one. There you go.
There.
And we're not going to put the new fan on quite yet.
Not yet. This will make installing the I/O shield a little easier. Where did we put over here?
So the I/O shield, the way you can tell is that just line it up with the motherboard and make sure you put it in the right way. There's only two ways it can go.
Right.
I sometimes have a little trouble snapping it into place, but you can take the back end of a flat screwdriver and just kind of tap around the edges if
Right,
you're having an issue
right.
with it.
Some chip
snapping
cases in
quarters.
particular, they seem to be slightly out of.
Yeah.
Anyway.
A little sandpaper maybe doesn't hurt too. Okay.
So the motherboard.
Now let's double check. We got all the screws in place. I think we do. This
Yeah.
came with them pre-installed.
So this one should have what, like 9 screw holes probably?
Probably fewer than that since it's micro ATX. But yeah. I've noticed, in fact, that most motherboards, even full-size ATX now go to like 8 screws. They remove the middle screw.
If you buy a case that doesn't have those the mounts pre-installed. Matching them up to your motherboard is really important because you don't want to have them touching the base of the motherboard where there is no screw hole.
Right. Now, what Corsair does that I really like is instead of a screw for the center one, they have a little nub so you can actually snap it into place.
I'd never seen this before, and I was thrilled
Yes.
because it makes getting it lined up. It means that the pressure from the ATX connector and that center nub mean that you kind of don't have to do too much
The
wiggling
little
to get the
screws are almost
in.
lined up. Now we need the screws for the motherboard, which should be in
They'll
this
be in a bag. I also like the Corsair case. So the case comes with, if you buy this case, down where the hard drive mounts are, at least in mine and in this one, there was a little box that fits into there. It has all the screws, all the hardware you
Right.
need, and each different type of screw is individually bagged. And the instructions even tell you which screws are for which you could figure out yourself.
Right.
But it's a little bit easier this way, and less chance of you screwing something up.
Right.
Now we didn't have to do the cooler before we put the motherboard in,
No.
because A, it has the big hole in the back, and B,
Right.
this cooler doesn't need through-hole connections.
I'm not clear. I've installed a few of these. I have not installed this particular model. It
Okay.
may not need a through hole. Even if it does, though, we're going to be able to do that because there's a cutout in the back.
We're doing this live.
And I'm going to show you guys, these are the screws you're using to screw the motherboard.
They're never
Into the
going to be able to
case.
see that.
Just look at the heads. They're very small.
Now, do you worry about stripping those? Since like I usually go back a quarter of a turn until it kind of clicks into place.
What have we got here? We've got something not lined up. What's going on?
I think you just need to push a little bit because of the flashing.
Actually, one of the things I need to do
No
is
word.
loosen stuff. Flashing is actually from modeling. Remember your plastic models?
Oh, is that all the stuff, the excess bits from the
Plastic?
injection molds?
Yeah, right.
Huh.
It's when you cast something.
Now we can push this in.
Your seams.
Yeah, I can push for you if you want.
I think one-handed is better.
Now, this is where the magnetic screwdriver really comes in handy.
Right. Now the rest of it should be lined up.
Do you find the cases in these Corsair coolers, or the fans in these Corsair cases are good enough to use on a day-to-day?
Yeah, they're
Are
not
they quiet?
particularly noisy. They're not particularly quiet. They're sort of average fans. They don't make a lot of noise.
Behind your,
Where is it? Oops.
right behind
behind
right
the
on the
mother-
other side
yeah,
of
the
the
memory.
RAM slots.
Yep.
So this board, it looks like has six screws.
Yeah, not counting the middle nub, which is, as we
Yeah.
noted, a wonderful thing.
No, it is counting it. Oh, no, 6 and
1, 2, 3, 4,
Four,
5.
five.
Yep, 6.
6. Yeah, okay. And you don't have to worry about screwing anything into the ones around
No,
the
that's
cooler.
for- that's
Those
for
are
the
for the
cooler.
cooler in
Yep.
a little bit. We'll get to that.
Now we're going to do the cooler first before we do memory, just
Okay.
so we don't have anything sticking out, and before we connect up power.
Okay.
So actually, is that true? No, I want to connect up the ATX 12-volt one first
Because that'll
that can
be hard to get to once
hard
the
to get to,
cooler's
right.
in. Yeah.
Now here's where we have the problem of not having to worry too much about dressing cables. Where's it?
So yeah, I mean,
Here's-
you're only dealing with 4 cables here, so it's
Right.
not that big a deal.
Plus-
Let's rotate around so people can see.
Okay. So we're going to run this out. Where's my power? Whoops.
Because we're having glasses as a problem. So there's a maybe that front shot, Joe. Yeah, there we go. There's a gate right here where my finger's poking through, and you're just going to run that out the back and then bring it out through the top one up here, probably.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is that 8-pin ATX.
It's the
CPU
auxiliary power for the CPU.
So I'm pulling up. You don't want to do too much yanking here, but it's probably fine. I love these little the rubber through holes that they've done for this case. It's really good.
One thing that I've noticed about the way all these things work is that you always have to twist the wrong direction. By that I mean, it doesn't install the natural twist of the cable.
Oh, it's always 180 degrees off. Yeah. And are you going to like zip tie or twist
No,
tie or anything
I'm not
back here?
gonna
You're
do
just going to leave it. There are little notches back here that
we
you
should
can
show
tie
that.
down if you
Actually,
want.
can we show that?
Come over to this other shot, Joey. Oh, well,
There we go.
here we go. So right here, there's divots cut out of the metal
Right.
in different places where you can use those zip ties or twist ties or whatever you want to kind of cinch this stuff down, if you feel it's important.
Right. Actually,
I don't.
the other thing we do before we install the cooler actually is do the power.
Oh, okay.
I mean, as in
The
switches.
the front panel headers,
Right.
and the USB 3, which you love.
Oh, I may do that last because of the way it gets in the way sometimes.
Okay.
Okay, so couple of things. I'm going to install the audio jack. Normally, I would actually put this on a sound card because
Okay.
I'm going to use a sound card in the final build. But today, we're just going to do integrated audio. So this will go on the motherboard, and then of course you have your usual power reset, hard drive.
Now,
lights.
does this motherboard come with one of those blocks? The ASUS boards that I've used in the past come with the little block
I didn't
that you
look,
plug
because
all
I
the
never
headers
use those.
into, and then you just drop that into the socket, and it's much easier than
Right.
trying to do it the hard way.
No block.
No block.
I never use those anyway. Is that my front panel? That looks like my front panel.
Okay, so let's. Are you gonna? Lloyd, you're gonna feed it through from the back now,
Right.
just so that stuff's accessible.
And when you talk about the headers, you mean these are things that connect the
Power
buttons
switch, reset switch,
and
the
all the
outlights.
I/O to the front of the case
Right.
on the motherboard.
Let's see, where is that? Okay.
Orientation on these
You're on the
matter.
USB 3.
That's right.
Some of them, the lights. It's only the lights. The switches are.
Now, one thing I
no
like that
orientation.
you can't possibly see this, but but what Asus did on this motherboard is one of the things that always drove me crazy
it's
was with the LEDs is which one's positive and which one's negative, and they actually put little plus and minus signs on them.
And is it on the actual the bottom of the socket, or is it on the board around it?
It's
I
on the
can't
board
see.
around it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So see, it's these guys down here. I think my hand's in the way.
and it's way tiny, way tiny. I don't know if you'll be able to get in close enough.
Yeah, it's right here.
But yes, they're labeled so you can take your plus and minus ones.
Now sometimes the cases aren't labeled.
Right.
Like that was my one complaint about the case when I rebuilt my PC the other day, is the case didn't have plus and minus on the headers.
Right. Do you know
so you
how
had
you
to just
tell?
guess.
Actually, you don't have to guess usually. What happens is, if this is like a stereo system, which I assume
Okay.
it is, you look at the wire. One wire does no writing on it, and the other
Oh.
wire has printing on it.
So is the wire with printing plus?
Usually it's the plus.
Interesting. That was, yeah. It's good to know.
So, of course, if the LED doesn't work, we'll know what happened.
And if you do it backwards, this isn't a place that you can cause problems. The worst thing that'll happen is that the light won't turn on.
Right, you just flip it around.
You have to open it up, flip it around, and it works fine.
Now,
There's
I
no
had
chance of
a
damage.
question from a reader once who said, why does the power LED come in two parts rather than in one connector?
Isn't that, well,
And the reason is, Intel motherboards often came with the LEDs as a 2-pin header. And
Intel brand
and
motherboards.
Intel branded
Yeah.
motherboards. And every other motherboard in the world had a 3-pin header. So you had to actually, anyway. The
them up.
fact they started splitting them up was a really wonderful thing.
For the audio, is it just HD audio?
Yes.
and that only goes one way. It's keyed. There's
Yeah.
the third pin on one side. It's an 8-pin header, 2 rows of 4. The third pin on one of the sides is keyed out, so you can't plug it in the
And
right
in
place.
and in the case of the power light, they actually label that the plus and minus on the little connectors.
Well, that's nice.
Okay. And since
are
this
you
is an ASUS motherboard, I know from heart where the power and where did I put my little power? Oh, here they are. Power and reset.
This is the only time when building a PC really feels like surgery.
This
Yes.
is having a headlamp here is really useful. Do you need some more light, Lloyd?
No, what I need is this is what I need. I'm good.
I can give you light. We have
So
light.
the power switch. Now the power switch is not sensitive to plus or minus.
Nor
It's
is the
under-
reset switch,
Nor is the
right.
reset switch. It's on either direction. And power switch is the center one on ASUS motherboards, and the reset's the outside one. And it says, and again, labeled on the motherboard, which is great. So we're done.
We used to have just
Oh.
a momentary switch that was plugged in, that you could just plug one of these headers into, so you could make any raw motherboard.
And then you look for the one that says audio front panel.
Okay.
And it is keyed, and it's keyed differently than a USB connector, so you don't
Right.
accidentally put it in the wrong way.
If your motherboard happens to have FireWire ports, I think it's keyed the same as a FireWire
Yes,
port. So
I made-
don't make that mistake.
I did that once.
Yeah, that was bad.
You know what I did? I destroyed a camcorder.
Yeah, because you plugged it into the HD audio.
No, because I plugged it into what was I thought was FireWire, and it was a USB.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Oops.
So we're in.
And there's no USB 2 ports on this, so we'll do the USB header later.
Right.
Okay.
Now you can, I believe, does ASUS include any extra headers in there? I don't know if they do.
They
on this
did
one.
not.
You can buy kits that allow you to like get a rear bracket USB 2
Yeah.
if you need more of them. This one has how many on it?
It's like
1, 2,
6.
3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, at least 6 on the back, plus the 2 on the
more
front.
on the front. You can also buy adapters that go either way for the USB 3 header on a case. If your motherboard doesn't have a USB 3 a motherboard header, or the other way around.
Right.
You can get all sorts of adapters. Like I found them on Amazon. They're all about $10.
Right, and the other thing I'm going to do, because just to make life easier on me later, is I'm going to pre-string the SATA cables.
Ooh.
There we go.
Two SATA cables are in either of these right angle. Oh, yep. We do have some right angle ones.
So these are the data cables that will connect your motherboard to your hard drive and your
Correct.
optical drive.
Correct.
So there's a bunch of different options on the case here. I'm going to tilt it up again so people can see. Here are our SATA ports down here in this corner right here. There's 4 that point up, and I think 2 or 4 that point out.
2 that point out.
on the edges. Now, how do you decide which ones to use? how do you decide where to use the right angle ports and the right angle end of the cable and the straight end of the cable?
Well, one thing is you never have to worry about anymore is which one's master or slave, right?
Right.
Because it's SATA. And you can boot off of SATA port 6.
You can change that in the BIOS.
Doesn't
It's
matter.
no problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I like to sort of, when I first install it, get to the ones that are kind of harder to get to when everything's installed, like the graphics card. And
Okay.
stuff.
So these will be blocked probably by the graphics card, or
Right.
at least be obstructed a little bit.
Right. So with that, then we'll run it through here. Actually, do we need to? Oh, for the SSD, yes, because the SSD is going to point that way. So
Okay.
we'll run that through there. Where you can see that. So we're coming out the back
Yeah.
now.
Coming out the back.
And then with the optical drive, we'll do the same thing.
Here it is. I gave you the wrong end.
We'll just run it in here.
I put the straight ones on the motherboard and the angled
Right.
ones.
That's
Now
what I
this
always do
one-
too.
Is going to come. And I don't think I have enough room. Do I? Maybe I do.
Yeah,
Let's see if I
you're
do.
probably good.
That way I can be really clean about this.
Well, you have a window in this, so it has to be clean, right?
As a matter
I'm
of
not taking
personal
this around to
preference.
LAN parties, so it's not a big deal. Let's see if this will reach. This will probably reach. Yeah, this should.
Not entering it
We'll
in
find
any
out.
case competitions.
Yep.
Okay. So you have your SATA ports connected, you have your front panel headers connected, your HD audio, you connected your CPU power.
Right.
And
We're
you
going to wait
pre-run
for
your-
main power till later.
Your your SATA cables.
Actually, I'm going to get the main power cable out of the way by running it out
Run
the
it
back,
through. Okay.
and we'll bring it in later.
I really like these big rubber gaskets on this. This is a nice. This is. Like it's amazing. I mean, Norm, Lloyd, and I have all been building computers for long enough that we remember when you could really physically harm yourself building a
Right.
computer, and this is
There's a
nice change.
a computer would never work unless you bled into it first.
Yeah.
Right.
I once
Or you have to
blended-
use the big ATX one as a spine
Right.
Yeah.
to lead off all the other cables.
Right.
Yeah.
Now let's see. We've got adapters. I actually need to figure out which adapter is correct. I think it's going to be this one.
Okay, so maybe Norm should show the different adapters so people can see.
Yeah. So
this is the
what
adapter
comes,
for AMD, I believe.
This is what comes
That
with
does
the
it.
cooler, and to mount the cooler onto the motherboard, you need to use these brackets. And that one that I just showed was it's the AMD one.
Do you need the instructions, Lloyd?
Yes, that'd be useful.
And here's two other ones. This one.
Yep, that's the one that goes underneath the motherboard.
This goes up.
No,
this one goes
yep.
underneath the motherboard. It'll pop up in the back, and you kind of put the bracket on top.
Right.
Here you go.
Just want to double check to make sure there are no stickers or anything like that. Intel, yep. Now, one thing that these things typically also do is that they're slightly adjustable. If you look on the back of these things, you'll see that they can slide a little bit.
Okay.
And I think we're going to make sure they're slid up for the LGA.
These are the mounts that go into
underneath
underneath
the
the
motherboard.
board.
They fit through the holes.
Right. So if you're building into a case that doesn't have a big hole behind the cooler, behind the CPU socket, you'll want to adjust. You want to put this on before you put the motherboard in the case.
Right. Or no, well, yeah, if you don't have the big hole in the back.
If you don't
right.
have the big hole in the back.
We do, so we're lucky.
Okay, so let's rotate. There we go. So that should just line up, right?
That's what we're thinking. Let's make sure that's the case. Oops.
Sometimes they only go one way or the other, but it's almost snaps in. Sometimes you have to do a little flexing, I've found. One of the other rules of PC building is that as a general rule, you shouldn't have to apply very much force.
No.
It's kind of like putting Lego together.
Right.
There's one exception. We'll get to that
Which
in a
is?
little bit. Memory.
This takes a little bit of force, but
Not a ton. You should never have to strain. Okay, so you had to move the pins in.
Right.
It took a little bit of work with the screwdriver. You pushed it down.
Right.
Just wiggle with it. Didn't require a lot of force. You just had to kind of get the knack right.
right,
And now the pins pop right into the holes.
right,
Now Norm asked a good question while you were working on that.
right.
How are you going to keep this from falling out? Is that in up here? Yeah, I guess it is.
Because I'm going to work. Now let's see.
You can work
According
sideways.
to Corsair,
Lloyd's consulting the instructions.
yes, no. This is the wrong. There should be some screws.
More
There should be a little bag of screws that came with the cooler.
So that one over there.
That's what I need.
Okay.
The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to install the little mounting points,
Ah.
which will then hold the thing in place.
Design has solved our problem. So
That's right.
Basically, this is the layering of the bracket. You have below the motherboard, below the case, that mounting bracket that Lloyd just installed, and you had to adjust the four corners of that mounting bracket to match the holes in the motherboard
So we
for
should-
this particular type of socket.
Do you want to rotate around so people can see?
Above the mounting bracket
Sure,
is then
go
the
ahead.
motherboard. And then to sandwich the motherboard, before we put in the actual brace, are 4 screws to hold this back brace intact. So you can actually put it on its back.
So maybe put 1 or 2 in, and then we'll switch
Now,
over.
according to the Corsair documentation, you want the short nub version for the LGA 1155, 1150 sockets.
I'm going to show people versus the long nub. We have a long nub example.
Or is it? Am I doing this right? Or no, I'm sorry. That's for the LGA. Sorry, my bad. I think that one's for the LGA 2011 one.
Yes.
This is LGA. They'll show the longer ones.
So this is one of those things where when you're doing this, you basically just want to look at what motherboard you have, what socket is on your motherboard, and then find the instructions for that socket, follow those instructions, and then probably put the other parts in a bag someplace where you'll be able to find them if you ever want to upgrade or change out and keep the same cooler.
Right.
I would put like 2 in, and then we'll flip around so people can see.
And hand tightening is good enough, really, because you're going to screw other things in later on top of that.
This is just to provide extra stability for something that's a little bit heavy, right?
Yeah, although not surprisingly, it's lighter than many air-cooled heat sinks. So,
Okay. You want to try the end probably?
try the which?
Well, there we go.
Perfect.
Okay. So then there's 2 more of those screws. We're losing screws all over the place here. It's like wallpaper bubbles.
There we go.
You got it, Norm? You got the case?
Yep.
Okay. So these 2 are in. There's 2 more to go.
Right.
I mean, the upshot, the reason, the nice thing about these is they're all pretty precise. So the goal is to apply the cooling surface to the CPU with exactly the right amount of force,
Right.
but without mashing anything or bending the board or causing undue stress.
Looks like we're good.
Is it supposed to be wobbly like that, or is that
Oh, they're all the way in.
okay? Okay. So what's next?
Next, we're going to apply the cooler itself,
Okay.
and then the bracket, and then the bracket that holds it down.
I'm gonna rotate this again.
Now, I'm going to leave this off.
That's probably a good idea. Rotate that so people can see.
Now, actually, the right way to do this is to actually install the fan and radiator first. So you kind of want to get the orientation.
Okay.
And in my case, you notice that I'm putting the orientation so that the coolant tubes are towards the top.
Okay.
Top of the case.
Toward what will be
Towards
the top when
of
it's
the
on
case,
its yeah.
right. If you did it the other way around, if you did it, there are other possible orientations. This won't fit, right?
Okay.
And this, you're going to be blocking your graphics card, right?
Which you don't want to do.
Right,
Yeah.
so-
So are you going to put the fan in between the radiator and the case, or on?
That's the way I think I'm going to do it. Let's see if Corsair agrees with me. Yep.
Corsair agrees.
The idea is to have the fan push
Pulling air through.
pull air from the inside out.
Well, is that what they recommend? I think it doesn't matter that much. My experience is that used to get pretty effective cooling. It doesn't say. Mounting the fan as an air intake.
Oh, taking air in.
Okay. You think about it, what that means is that we're drawing cool air from the outside over the radiator.
Right.
Right? So that's actually what you want to do.
I mean, that makes sense, but then the general theory on airflow in cases is you suck in from the front and blow out the back
Right.
at the top, and so you might have some weird negative pressure here.
Right.
So you definitely want to blow air out
Hold
the
that if
top,
you want,
though.
Lloyd. And
We have these really long screws going through the
yeah,
fan
they'll go all the way through the whole thing, right?
and then into the cooler itself.
Or the radiator.
Radiator, excuse me.
And is this whole pump powered just off of a 4-pin header?
Oops, my bad. Let's see, how does this one work? I think this is. Makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, it does make life a lot easier.
Check the radiator. Check this heatsink. Does it have a separate connector?
I didn't want to. Yeah, it's a single 4-pin, 3-pin header even.
Okay.
Crazy.
Yeah, I'm not in. There we go.
Oh, you pinched your cable?
User error. No, I rotated my cable.
Oh.
There we go. That way.
And okay, so we should talk about the fan. Is this is the round fan? The fans typically have on the side of the fan. Maybe you can show it on the other one,
Oh,
the
yeah.
norm. 2 arrows. One that
Right.
shows the direction of airflow.
Actually, since we took this out, we'll show this.
And it's
Where do I?
Actually, that's good. You're right there. You can see it right here. So this is saying the air is going to go through that way, and the fan rotation is going to be that direction. That's important. You also want to kind of look at the direction the cable is going to come out of this fan before you put it on.
Which is the mistake I just made.
Which is the mistake that Lloyd just made. It's one of the common blunders, along with starting a land war in Asia.
Now, we don't tighten it yet because we're going to put in all the screws before we do the final
hold up for
tighten.
you here. This is where having 3 hands really helps. Is that a good line?
Right, almost. Yeah, they have this wonderful tool for bicycles called the third hand.
Is it just a small man that runs around with you with only one arm?
If only that were true. No, it's a, where's the other screw?
Do we lose it?
You drop it on the ground.
This is where having a screw bucket is really handy. I can get my chapstick out and find it, Norm.
There it is. Okay, that's better. The other thing I didn't do, because I typically don't, I found them to be more, oops.
I think you missed.
Oops, I missed. There we go. More annoying than useful are the washers. These have a pretty broad head. A lot of these coolers come with rubber washers.
Was that to isolate noise from the fan?
Yes, but I found that I've squished them flat enough so it doesn't actually have any impact.
Okay, so skip the grommets, skip the washers. Fan, radiator in. We need to mount the cooler now.
Right. Now there are actually 2 connectors. There's one which is the 4-pin CPU connector, which is the fan.
So you want to plug that into the CPU header on
Right,
the motherboard, or else
right.
the motherboard's going to complain, right?
And then the other one is just any 3-pin connector, any connector.
But you can also plug that in a 4-pin header, just on the 3-pin side. They're keyed.
Right. Now
So
it's
you can
also
see.
worth noting that some of these coolers, particularly one made by Isotech, actually you connect the fan and the heatsink one together and then put it into one.
Okay, so
But
it's one
this-
unified.
Right.
Okay.
But this one doesn't do that. So.
Okay. So any particular orientation on the you're just doing this to get the wires out of the way.
And the minimum flux on the tubes.
Tubes. Okay. And you want to not. So we should talk about the thermal. This gray stuff on the bottom is thermal grease. It's
Right.
pre-applied. It's a pad.
Correct.
You don't have to add Arctic Silver or anything like that.
Right.
Just try not to gouge it up before you have the cooler ready to mount.
Right.
Now, if you are using a cooler where you're applying or you're reapplying the cooler, and you have some putty or some of the paste,
Right.
how much did you put on?
A little tiny bit, and then I take like an X-Acto knife, I spread it out as thin as I can on the CPU surface.
So you spread
Or
it out
the-
before. You don't use let the
I spread it out
cooler-
before, yeah, but really thin.
Okay. So
Some
now you
people-
have your bracket. That just goes on the top here. I can hold if you want.
And this is really interesting because what Lloyd's going to do to screw on that bracket
I can hold it in place if you want.
Yep.
is this
Got it.
thumb screw.
Yep.
We missed one on the right side here.
So this actually
Lift it
is
up.
already sitting there.
There we go.
Lloyd's going to put a thumb screw on top and lock in the bracket.
I like the artist recreation. This is a good call because there's no chance anybody's ever going to be able to see this. There's basically the thumb screws make this a lot easier than it used to be, though.
And they're not even screws; they're thumb sockets.
Yeah. The screw head is
head,
actually
yeah.
on the mount point, which is kind of nice. Okay, I think you let go.
Okay,
Got 2 of them in place.
that makes it a ton easier. And do you think that it's important to cinch these down reasonably well when you're done, right?
That's what we're going to do with the screwdriver. Now you notice that the last one I had to actually apply some pressure because it wants to be fairly tight, right?
It's a spring. That bracket is a little springy.
Right.
Basically.
And like when you change your spare tire, you're going to kind of alternate.
So you're using a mechanical screwdriver here.
Right.
If you don't have a torque control mechanical screwdriver, you do not want to wrench down on this
You
too
don't
hard.
over-torque it. Yeah, you just
Yeah.
want to do it like maybe a quarter turn past hand tight.
Like what? Yeah, just barely more than you can hand
Right.
tighten it is the goal.
In fact, let's make this a little bit tighter. There we go.
How many foot-pounds do you think that is?
I don't know. I didn't. I have a torque wrench, but I don't use it for this kind of stuff. There we go.
Okay.
Now,
Solid.
let's put in the power.
Okay.
This is the power for the pump, which can go to any 3-pin connector or 4-pin connector that doesn't say CPU fan.
And are you going to want to have that set that to anything special? When you get in the BIOS, you're going to want to set that to quiet mode or anything like that, or you just leave it full blast all the time?
I leave it on what's called normal settings, which it does power down a little bit. Does this have the
There's
header?
one right over there. Is this the CPU one over here?
No, that's a chassis fan. That's the one I was looking for. There we
Okay.
go. It goes there, and the CPU and the one from the
CPU's
fan
right there, yeah.
and that goes to the one that's
And the
labeled
CPU one
CPU.
is typically labeled
CPU.
CPU.
So the reason you want to plug that into the CPU is if you don't have a fan plugged into the CPU connector, the BIOS is going to complain. It's going to say, hey, your CPU fan's not spinning. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. My computer's, I'm going to catch on fire. Please help me.
The
Help.
motherboard also
Help.
regulates the RPMs on the CPU fan and the case fans differently.
Both of those things are true.
Right. Now let's put the main power connector in, and then we'll put memory.
Okay. So you pre-ran half of that. You're just going to run up the top here.
Yep.
This is keyed, so it only goes one direction. They're all what, 24 pins now?
Yep, all of them are 24 pins now.
This is the tough part. We're done with the tough part.
We've done all the scary stuff.
Yeah, the rest is easy breezy.
You can tell which way it goes because
So let's show the key. Can we show the key?
Yeah, you can see it. So here's the little switch. If you have a really old PC and don't have 24 pins, you can break that part off. On the actual socket, there will be a little lip that hinge hooks into.
Right. And it's always, again, the wrong
and
bend.
it's always 180 degrees off.
And you'll hear a click.
Yeah, sometimes you feel the click more than hear it.
It's all the way in.
Do you want to go ahead and do the USB at the same time, or you feel like you might knock it loose?
I want to do the graphics card before I do the USB because
Okay.
that thing
All right.
is easily destroyed. No, but memory next, though.
Yes,
Memory.
Yes, yes.
Can we sing the song, Lloyd?
I'm going to show the
Song?
memory.
Memories.
No. Please don't.
It's copyrighted. That's as much as we can do. So this is.
So here's my rationale on the memory. You'll notice this is an 8 gigabyte kit, not a 16 gigabyte kit.
Yeah.
However, it is DDR3 1866.
Okay.
Which means I can run it at 1600 reliably.
Okay.
So my general philosophy is to always run memory at one speed grade lower than the manufacturer recommends.
Okay.
It's the manufacturer's maximum setting.
Memory is one of those things that's ESD sensitive, so
Right.
don't touch the gold parts.
So now it's not universally true. Some memory will work fine at this maximum rated speed, but I just sort of am cautious about stuff like that because memory reliability is a big deal.
I err on the side of not crashing. So memory, most modern systems have multi-channel memory systems.
Right.
So you can see
Dual
on this
channel.
board, it's dual channel. There's yellow slots and brown slots, or maybe black slots, I can't tell. You want to populate, nowadays, you always populate the same color slots first.
Right.
In the old days, that wasn't the case, but now,
Yeah. Now the other thing is that this motherboard has the fixed levers on one side.
I love that.
So you only have to snap in one side. So
That's great. But you still want to put it in
Straight
equal
down.
pressure on both sides,
Straight
right?
down.
Straight
yes.
down.
And this
does it matter which color, which set you put in?
I have this tendency to put it the furthest away one first, but it's just a superstition more than anything.
Sometimes the motherboards say, the manual will say which one you're supposed to populate first. More on triple channel systems than dual channel systems.
There we go. We're in.
This is the only place also you have to apply real pressure.
Yeah, and it's
ha-
not that much.
It's not a ton, but it is more.
In
it
fact,
feels dangerous, and the motherboard bends.
If you don't hear the click after you've put a lot of pressure in, stop
That's
because
bad.
you've probably oriented the wrong way.
Oh, yeah, it only goes in one way.
Right.
There's a left side and a right
Look
side.
for the key, which is
Right.
not in the center.
Yeah.
It's shorter, fewer of the gold contacts
It
on one
lines
side.
up with the notch in the
Right.
slot.
And look
That's
for
right.
the notch, and then push that in.
Okay, so we have CPU, memory, cooler, motherboard, power supply.
Graphics card.
Graphics card is next.
Actually, no. Let's do storage before we get.
Getting crazy.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
Now, like I said, let's get the SSD first. Actually, no. Let's have the big one first. Let's get the optical drive. in.
You really want that optical
It'll just
drive
snap
line.
in. Yeah, it's not a big deal.
How do you get the hard part is always figuring out how to get the front bezel out. You're just gonna push. That wasn't that hard.
So Blu-ray drives, pretty cheap these days.
Right. This is actually, if I recall correctly, yeah, this is a BD-ROM DVD writer. So it's just to watch Blu-ray movies or to write DVDs.
How many Blu-rays have you written?
Actually, I did one for back when my daughter was doing Color Guard and stuff. I did a Blu-ray for their.
I wrote one DVD.
So I've done like total of 4.
I've done 0.
Pretty good. This case has a toolless design for the optical drives.
Yes.
And I couldn't. It took me a little bit to figure it out. And I'm reasonably good at building computers. So
Snap open first.
okay, snap it open. Can I slide it in?
Yep, slide it in.
Always ask for permission.
I feel like it's maybe not open.
It's probably just the.
Does it tilt back
Yeah, you're just not lining up with the.
with the slot?
Yeah, these. I think you're crashing into the. So push front down front. There you go.
Okay, so now it's definitely stuck on something. There we go.
Oh,
There we go. Flush.
They're snapped in place.
Yeah, and to make this latch work, it's just out of the shot, but it pulls out. Oh, damn.
And it did.
Yeah. You want it out, not in. Because if it's in, it's unlatched, and if it's out,
Let's take a look.
it's backwards, basically.
There we go. There's the holes.
By the time I figured this out the other night, I just was ready to break it off, and I couldn't figure out how to get the damn thing off.
If you do happen to break it off, you can still use screws.
There are screw holes on both sides, and there's even two screw holes on this other side. Lloyd,
Oh, I see where it goes. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of this toolless
go,
optical
we're in.
drive bay.
Okay,
There
we're
it
in.
goes.
Okay. So let's show, just so people can see. Here is, come back on this front shot. Thanks. Oop. Well, they're never, okay, never mind. It's over here. It's in, trust us. The instructions in the manual didn't tell you how to do it. It was a little bit frustrating.
Okay, a couple things to note. This has 3 trays for SSDs and 2 hard drives.
That's a lot of dollars worth of SSDs.
Yes, right. General recommendation, unless you're really a speed
bring it so
freak, is
people
not
can
to
see.
do SSD RAID arrays.
Why is that, Lloyd?
Mainly because Windows doesn't do trim on RAID arrays.
Trim is the housekeeping stuff that,
Right.
that rewrites
Right.
empty cells or
Right.
deleted cells.
Now, some SSD controllers have sort of a pseudo trim built into their firmware and kind of do it automatically, but Windows won't do it for
Is that SSD controllers on the SSD side or SSD controllers
on the
that-
SSD itself.
motherboard? Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm showing on the back of the SSD right now the 2 SATA connectors. The small one's for data, and the big one is for power.
Right.
And they're both hooked at the end, so there's a little
They're
knob.
notched,
They're notched.
yeah.
So you can only go in one way.
Now, among performance geeks, the hot thing these days is PCI Express SSD cards. But they cost a lot of money. If
Yeah.
you think this is expensive, those things cost a lot of money.
And I mean, like I know if you're running massive databases and stuff like that, you'll see some performance gains. But if you're just playing Team Fortress 2 or Dota 2 or something like that,
Right.
are you going to notice?
Right? No, probably not. So we're going to slide this in. There's a little lever. I'm going to slide in the lowest one.
So you don't even have to take this out of the case. It's
Right.
just you just open up the backside and jam that in
Slide in
there,
there.
and it clicks into place.
And it's clicked into place.
And
There it
there's no
is.
moving parts, so it's not like you could theoretically just leave it dangling and it would probably be okay.
Right.
It's not recommended.
I've done that when I've
Never
been
leave
moving
it
drives
dangling.
around.
I've left it dangling
Okay.
before.
So now, if you remember our little power thing,
Okay.
so we're going to do power.
Okay.
Since this is the side of the case, we're going to do the short one. I could, if I was
Hold on, I thought you were going to do
really
just one.
obsessive, don't address my cables. Yeah, probably.
People will tell you that you should address your cables
I
on the
know.
internet.
If I don't
you
do this, they're going to get mad. Yeah.
people get fussy.
So we're going to run our cables
We
through.
don't want to forget this fan either.
That's the case fan. Do we have one
That
more
is-
fan socket?
We have more fan sockets, yes.
Okay, good. So there's
Okay,
one.
so this is another situation where the cables always are 180 degrees off.
This one doesn't seem to be. Look at that. Goes in the right way.
So you're using the lowest one that's available.
Yeah, I just want enough excess to be able to go up to the
come back around and out to the optical.
optical drive.
You're
Yeah.
going to go ahead and do that now. I
Yep.
may or may not be able to see that.
So
And there
you can
goes
show
your
it.
2
It clicks
long
in.
SATA power connectors.
Right.
Yeah. We have a SATA cable here on the back.
Oh, yes,
data.
for data. Yeah, this is
Right
the.
here, I think.
That's the one that I want for the optical drive.
So now is a good time to plug in that SATA data.
Might as well. We're back here, right?
Right.
And these are the hooked ones, the L-shaped ones as well.
No, this is not the L-shaped one.
this
Since
one's
we have
just
plenty of
straight in?
room,
There you go.
Hold your L-shaped one back down here.
and then the L-shaped one will go into the SSD.
Okay.
Give us enough room here.
More than enough room.
These are nice because they have the metal snapping part.
Right.
Yeah, the latch that holds in place. If you ever need to remove these, all you do is squeeze the metal part and it pulls right out.
Right. So there we go. We got storage in place.
Okay. Do you want to do that other case fan while we're in here?
Yeah. Where was that?
It's right here. I got it. I'll feed it through from the bottom.
And then
for
did you see the 3-pin?
There's
connection?
one up here, I think.
You're right. There is one. It says chassis fan. My God.
I'm gonna unplug it. Yeah, most cases these days have at least 2 or 3 chassis fans. I find. Do you want me to bring it? I don't know if it'll reach all the way
I think it'll come in. Let's see if it does.
up here.
Yeah.
There you go.
Up through here, and it just reaches.
Just
Look at that.
barely. You have a little bit of slack if you need it. This is going to be real gnarly from this side
Okay, we're
and
done.
look awesome from the other side.
Yeah, but this is a completely black,
Yeah, it's
not
a-
transparent sides.
Don't tell anybody.
Now notice on this case there are some air holes on the top. You don't have fans to put on the top, but if you wanted to increase your circulation,
Right.
you could do that.
That's where you would need a fan controller or at least additional connectors off the power supply to connect them up with if there's not enough on the motherboard.
Something more.
Right. Let's go ahead and do
is it USB 3 time?
Yep, let's do that before.
So this was new to me. I'd never seen this one before.
Can we get a close-up on this?
Other one. You were good before, right there.
Okay. This is the worst connector in the world. It's actually worse than the portable USB connector, micro USB connectors.
It reminds me of the old like floppy drive controller.
This thing is very short.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't latch.
Great.
No latching mechanism. Well, it just has a tiny
Has a
latch, but
notch.
it doesn't. Not very. The cable is extremely stiff.
Yeah.
So it's easy. I have had this thing rip off, so I had bare pins. I've had the thing break off. I mean, it's just terrible.
It's a disaster.
Whoever
You'd think we
designed
would have
this-
known by now. Okay, so you probably want to line up and make sure the orientation is going to be right before you
Right,
push
but
it through
luckily
the hole.
I have plenty of cable space.
You do have a lot of cable.
So yeah.
So let's rotate around so people can see.
So there is a notch which faces the outside of the motherboard in the
Okay.
connector itself, and there's my key.
Yeah.
So we'll go that way. And it's extremely easy also to bend the pins.
Pins are
inside.
real delicate, it looks like.
Okay, there we go.
It's kind of unfortunate.
Okay, graphics card, Norm.
Wow.
So this is it. This is the last thing.
It's a stiff cable.
Yeah.
That's what.
This graphics card, where can we show this?
Really, Will? Really? Of all the things that have been said in this
the
build,
stiff cable.
really?
It is what she said.
Requires slightly more power than average. It's got an 8-pin connector and a
Okay.
6-pin connector. It doesn't have two 8-pins, which is a good sign.
Okay.
They haven't overclocked it too much.
Now, I actually like putting the power.
Now, hold on.
But
in-
But
gotta-
wait.
Wait. Let's see. Let's line
Wait,
it up
hold that.
and see which
Oh, this is a
looks
good
like.
thing.
It's both the outermost slots.
So yeah, sometimes it's the outermost slot. Sometimes it's the second and third slot on the back that you have to take off. You don't want to figure that out as you're trying to lower the board.
Now, one thing that this motherboard, this case has is 5 slot brackets. If you look on the back,
Okay.
You say, but wait a minute, micro ATX boards only have 4 slots. But remember,
Hey Lloyd, but wait a minute. Micro ATX boards only have 4 slots.
you remember talking about those external brackets you can get for extra PCI
Yeah, I
or
love
for extra
those.
USB connectors? You can do that without consuming a slot space.
Or alternately, if you're doing 2 video cards, you want to put your video card in the bottom socket, you can dangle it off the edge of the board too, right?
Yep.
Are you not going to plug in your power first here?
Nope.
You know, I used to do that when the power sockets were on the end. Now that they're on the top
In
facing
fact,
side, it's much
I still
easier.
do it when it's on the end, but this one isn't on the end, so it's not a big deal. We're in.
Click, click. And there's a latch on the end of the socket. If you ever need to lift the board out, you're going to want to put your finger down the back edge of the board and just push down on that little thing to release the notch at the end of the video card. Do you do both screws on a dual slot card, or do you do just one?
For today, I do. For quick and dirty ones, sometimes I just do one.
This motherboard has 2 PCIe X16 slots.
Yep.
You want to put the one closest. The primary one is usually the one closer to the CPU.
Right.
And sometimes some motherboards actually matters.
And,
Sometimes, whoops. Oh, that's gone.
Magnets.
I got it.
yeah, I got forceps if you don't.
I got dainty girl hands.
You didn't say that on the internet, did you?
Yeah, it's fine. I've done much worse on the internet. I might need your forceps. Wait. You just need one of those magnet. Oh yeah.
I actually have one of these.
Oh, the grabby things are great. There you go.
Let's try this again.
I was going to go ahead and start it, but I couldn't see where the hole was. Norm.
There we go. We're in.
Should we talk about the contest again real quick? Is this
Yeah,
the time?
once we're almost done. So again, we are going to be giving away one of these EVGA GTX 780 OC graphics cards.
Is it from
Plus-
Orange County?
No, it's overclocked.
Oh.
It's even better than the 780. Plus
No
the
death
Corsair
cab
case, and also the Corsair 700-watt power supply. All of those, we're giving one person. If you're watching this on Tested or YouTube, like the video on YouTube, and all we need you to do
is
is
that the right way?
post a comment either on
Figure it out.
Tested
I think
or
it's
in the YouTube
backwards.
comments, posting
The
what
notches are wrong.
graphics card
Oh,
and
you're right.
what storage you have
There we go.
on your computer right now. Because this build is based around the graphics card and the storage. We chose a very high-end GPU and a very nice SSD. Share with us what your current configuration is in the comments. We'll give people about a month. And
Let's say until October 25th.
October 25th.
October.
Actually, shouldn't you give him a little leeway so that he'll have a winner picked by then?
We'll have a winner picked by October 25th.
October 25th.
Post in the comments, like the video. You could win one of these graphics cards thanks to EVGA and Corsair for donating them.
Okay, so back to the build.
PCI Express power connectors.
Yeah, they always are 6-pin, 2-pin convertible,
Right.
or most of the time in my experience. You have to get it right. It'll
Right.
only go in one way.
There is typically a couple of little tabs that allow you to sort of nest this together.
So switch back to that close shot if we can, Joey. There we go.
See,
So, yeah.
see, little pins, little tabs, and then just
And they
nest
hook in
together.
under the lip at the top of the connector. And then, just like the big PCI,
Straight,
just
yeah.
like the big power connector, you just jam it in there and it
Yep.
should kind of click into place.
We are all the way, not quite.
Now-
There we go. Now we're all the way in.
Is there any logic to like which power cables you use for the video card?
Not
Do you have to-
anymore.
you don't have to worry about that
The
anymore.
reason is that almost all modern power supplies, particularly for higher power current power supplies, are single rail now.
Okay, so that means it's all the power is coming from one circuit.
Right.
So even if you have one of these cables with 2 wires on it, you can go ahead and plug both of them in the same video
Right.
card. It's
Exactly
fine.
right.
Good to know. Okay, so I guess after this, we flip it on its edge, plug it in.
And see, if we need a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse.
So let's
Plug
take
in.
a quick break.
Do you want to take the risk and close off the sides? Never do that.
I always
I know
close
it's
the sides.
superstitious. I close off the sides because
Yeah.
there's no reason it's not going
Confidence.
to boot.
No, actually, there's a practical reason. Yes, there are reasons why it might not boot, or there are reasons, for example, where it'll boot and the CPU is running at 80 degrees. So keeping the case open is more a convenience thing than a superstition.
I just expect perfection when
Every
for my
time.
builds.
Always the first
I want a
time.
contest, Norm.
Blindfolded.
Blindfolded.
So what we'll do is
Yeah.
take a quick break. We'll bring a monitor up here. We'll boot up this PC for the first time, confirm that the build it works,
And then
that'll
install
be it.
Windows.
And that's yeah.
Yeah, let's get crazy. And we're back. We have a monitor, we have a keyboard, we have a mouse. Not a mouse.
But we still haven't booted this up yet.
We haven't turned it on. We still don't know. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You
Ready.
didn't put the door on. I don't know about this whole not putting the door on. I'm going to plug it in. Norm, you want to do the honors? Press the button. I'll press the front button.
That button's press the
on?
back.
That
ready.
button's on. I don't know where the power button is here.
Uh-oh. Always the problem.
Is it? There we go.
That's a good sign.
Light.
Pretty loud.
Not quite.
And can you see the monitor?
Is the monitor on?
I don't think the monitor's on. Oh, yeah, it is. Something happened.
Yeah, let's-
The fans just spun up again. It's thinking. I hear optical drives. Still nothing on the monitor.
Sometimes first boot takes a while.
Wonder if we.
There
Oh,
we
there it
go.
goes.
Oh, blow it up.
Let's say hit F1 to get in BIOS.
F1. Yeah, it's always different, isn't it? Sometimes it's delete, sometimes it's F1.
Okay, what I want to do is check the temperature.
Wow.
What does it, oh look, the temperature is
33 C.
33 degrees centigrade.
Hey,
See
nice.
that?
High five. So this is a fancy BIOS. I haven't seen one of these
This
before.
is an EFI mouse-controlled BIOS.
I gotta get into. I gotta get a new motherboard. It's time.
Yep. So go ahead and set the clock.
I can't see any of that. Can you turn the screen around a little bit, Norm? Where is the clock? Oh, right here. Okay.
So we're going to install Windows 8.1, which is going to take advantage of the,
Right.
the new power
I
management.
happen to have Windows 8.1 right here in my pocket.
Right. So even
Because
though we
everybody carries
installed,
that around.
even though we installed an optical drive, you're going to install Windows off a USB key.
Right, just because it'll be faster.
Now, did you have to do anything special to the motherboard to get the boot off that key?
That's a good question. We're going to check. You know what we're going to do? We're going to be wild and just try and boot and see
You're
what
just gonna
happens.
plug it in, see what
That's
happens.
right.
Older motherboards won't boot from the USB key unless you have a special USB
Right.
key. This one, let's just plug it in.
Okay.
I have a
You-
feeling
you
it's gonna
don't, you don't want me to look at boot modes or anything like that?
No, let's boot it.
Okay.
Let's try it.
I'm exiting. I've said it's 140158 on 912.
Is that a USB 3 key?
Save
No.
changes and
It
reset.
shouldn't matter.
Yes. It's so weird to be in the BIOS with a mouse. So weird.
And if it doesn't find the boot device, we'll just set it up so it does.
You might have to hit a button. I like these new cleaner boot menus. That's much better than the old green blurry thing. It hasn't said there's no boot device yet, which is promising.
Nope, we're back,
Back in the BIOS.
That's kind of odd. Did you hit a key, Norm?
Nope.
I'm gonna come around. Here, I got it.
Okay.
Go to advanced mode.
Right.
Oh, but there's just a boot menu. Kingston Traveler, 7.
Yep, that's the one.
gigs.
Bam. Wow, that was easy.
There we go.
And there's
Windows
the
8.1.
Wow.
How long does it take? How long does it take to install Windows off of a thumb drive?
Probably
onto
about
an
10
SSD?
minutes.
Okay, so that is building. We're installing Windows. You'll have a ton of stuff on the site about this
Right.
machine. It's going to be your production machine, right?
It's going to be my main gaming rig.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
And you'll be running a ton of benchmarks. You'll find that on Tested. And one final reminder, if you want to win the E EVGA GTX 780 OC video card, a $650 video card,
Yeah.
plus the Corsair Obsidian 350D case and the 700S power supply. All you have to do is like the video and submit a comment below. It doesn't matter if it's on Tested or on YouTube. Let us know what your current GPU and storage setup is, because GPU and storage was the crux.
Yeah, and then
this build.
when they build a system, maybe we'll do a benchmark off or something like that.
Yeah.
Sounds
yeah.
like a great idea.
Share your benchmarks.
We'll pick a random winner by October 25th. And if you have questions about PC building, post them in the comments on Tested, post them below. We'll answer as many as we can. I think this has been a lot of fun. We'll see you guys very soon from Tested. I'm Will.
I'm Norm.
Thanks, Lloyd.
I'm Lloyd.
See ya.